welcome back to another episode of Unscripted. My name is Emily Rosca, and I'm the managing editor at The Phoenix.
And I'm Lucas Neighbor, and I'm an A&E editor at The Phoenix.
In this week's episode of Unscripted, we're going to be talking about Martin Scorsese's latest film, The Irishman, which had a limited release in theaters starting November 1st, and it's going to hit Netflix November 27th.
Frank Sheeran. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, you said it right.
Under the contract, management can only fire a driver on very specific charges. So, you ever show up late?
No.
Do you have any moving violations?
No.
Do you drink on the job?
No.
You ever hit anybody?
On a job?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
All right, then. We don't have nothing to worry about.
So The Irishman is Martin Scorsese's newest mob movie, and it's based on the book I Heard You Paint Houses by...
That's also, sorry to interrupt, the most clever, reason for that name.
What? You want to explain what the reason is?
Yeah, when the film is introduced, there's in big block letters, I heard, and then a scene, and then you paint houses, whatever, interspersed with B-roll, we'll call it. And when it reaches the end and it's the paint houses one, you just see blood splatter onto a wall after someone was shot. And I love that imagery.
It's great. I mean, you see a lot of stuff like that in his movies, and it's just this great attention to detail. But Charles Brandt wrote this book called I Heard You Paint Houses, and he wrote the book as a biography of Frank the Irishman Sheeran, played by Robert De Niro in the movie. So Frank Sheeran is a World War II vet and a meat truck driver. He delivers big slabs of meat. And the movie sort of portrays his rise unexpectedly through, the Italian crime family, because it starts out with him delivering steaks to mob bosses illegally, stealing them. And it ends with him shooting his best friend in the back of the head.
I wanted to cry.
Yeah, it is a really tough third act, but the movie follows Frank Sheeran as I don't know how old he is, but he's ancient. He's in a wheelchair in an old person's home, and he's just recounting his life and how he got to the place where he is. And it's kind of this beautiful, sweeping, incredibly long portrayal of just another one of Scorsese's mob protagonists. But it's taken way slower than Scorsese's movies in the past, typically. So what did you think of the movie?
It was interesting. I am not the biggest, old movie watcher, and I would need to, get into those more and, see all the classics. So I don't know what other, Scorsese films I've seen. What? Molly, maybe you should cut that out.
No. That's important context that you haven't seen a Scorsese movie. It's just funny because you called him an old movie director, but Wolf of Wall Street's 2013, Silence is 2016.
He directed Wolf of Wall Street?
Yeah. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, perfect. We have a Scorsese fan in the house.
Yeah, The Wolf of Wall Street was a 2.5-hour movie, so this one is obviously much longer, but it was just a sweeping epic, kind of like you said, of Frankie's life, and it really, the camera did stay on so many scenes, longer than kind of necessary, but it was obviously useful to the plot, even though it is sort of a biography of Frankie's life and all the people involved in it. I think you also kind of get a really good picture of all of those people, and a lot of that is because of the film's runtime. So you're able to get a pretty wholesome picture of all of the characters, and you I at least came to really love Jimmy. And was heartbroken when Frankie shot him. I just didn't expect it, and maybe I just missed a part of his conversation earlier in the movie with Russell, because they were saying, and he's I just had to get you involved, but I didn't realize that Frankie was the one that had to do the shooting. That's horrible.
So
obviously.
Yeah, that's sort of I guess this is a better time to get into it now than earlier, but. That's one of the things that Scorsese brings to this stuff. It's for as much as he's not endorsing mobs and he's not endorsing Italian crime, Scorsese's American Italian. He grew up in New York. He loves, the gruff talk, the little hand gestures, the the weird formalities of their manners, like the way that, the things that, piss characters off in this movie, the things that, like, are vitally important to them. It's like, in Goodfellas, there's, like, a great little segment that's just, like, a cooking instruction video. And it's all about, like, crushing the garlic with a razor and chopping it up into little pieces instead of using a knife, because it'll just get mushy. And this movie really leans into that. It's like, for as much as this movie's broader than Scorsese's like earlier stuff and more like reflective and somber, it's also, like you said, it's this thing where the characters don't really build other than we watch them like live their daily lives for years and years and years in this movie. And it strangely feels really personal.
Yeah, I agree. Explain to me a scene at the beginning that probably just went over my head. So when he first gets into the business, he starts like delivering the steaks to these like mob men, and then you get to the one scene where like he opens the truck and it's like
completely
empty. Like,
yeah. So what he was doing was he was skimming off the top originally, and it's kind of a classical like mob and like organized crime movie trope is like you start out small, but then by the end it's gotten so big that you can't ignore it. And that's like a compartmentalization of it. Yeah, so originally like you see him take those 2 tags off of the big slabs of beef and then he slides them over to the discard rack. But by the end of it, he hasn't even, he's done away with the formality of leaving some for the people who actually bought it. He just got rid of all of them. Robert De Niro's obviously not a bad liar. And in that scene, Frank's looking all over the place. He's like stuttering over his words as he tries to lie. He's like, yeah, I really don't know what happened to him. It's like, well, what do you think happened to him? Like, normally you drive around with like 500 pounds of beef in the back and now there's nothing there. You're gonna notice. And so I think the point was he had to show up specifically, like, just because if he didn't, they would have known that he stole them.
that makes sense. Well, and then after that, he like ends up, does he get sued? So that's when we meet the lawyer.
I don't know if they sue him, but they just file like he's getting charged criminally. Like they want to arrest him for theft or fire him, basically. So that's when we meet Bill Buffalino, who's Russ Buffalino. That's Joe Pesci, is cousins with Bill Buffalino, and Ray Romano is great as Bill Buffalino. He's the sleazy like lawyer, and that first scene where we're introduced to him, and Frank Sheeran's like in the room. He's like, well, did you do it? He's like, I don't care if you did it. You can.
I don't care whether you did it or not. That makes no difference to me.
Yeah, I know.
I'm here to defend you, right?
Right. What do you want to know? You want to know if I did it or not?
I was going to bring that up.
Frank's like, oh, do you want to know if I did it? And he's just kind of like, well, I don't care. And they're just kind of sitting there, and Frank says like, I work hard for them when I'm not stealing from them. And it's just great. And the whole movie is kind of just stuff like that. It's, we had a job here, we had a job here, and a lot of it just sort of, 3.5 hours of plot points is too much to just go through. But all of it is just really great and really intimate. But going on, we start to see the stuff that we need to take from it. It's like watching a Scorsese movie teaches you how to analyze movie scenes in a way, because he will give you just scene after scene after scene, and then slowly he'll make it more and more obvious what you should be paying attention to, until by the very end, Russ is saying to Frank, it is what it is. I had to put you on this, tell him it is what it is. And, that you didn't really fully catch what he meant, but by that point, it's like pretty clear that it's over for Jimmy. Whether that's by Frank's hand or by someone else's, it's pretty clear that, that's what we've been watching is Jimmy Hoffa's fall from grace.
Well, I think Jimmy was more, he was more like truer of a person for Frank, I feel like, because Russ was the person that you went to, like they described in one scene, like pretty like elongated, how he's the guy that you go to literally for everything. Like whenever you need something, he's the one that you go to. And so I think he just kind of became that person for Frank, but also being like his mentor and friend, while Jimmy, and that's also evident in like how Peggy, Frankie's daughter, like felt about the two of them. So I think that's representative of like what they signified in his life, or what each of them signified in Frankie's life. Because Peggy, who I think she was such an interesting like moderator almost in the movie, and she was in science when you have to like drip a little thing into water and then it turns a specific color, so
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know the proper terminology, but I feel like she was kind of that in the movie.
Like a litmus test.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting. It's like that old idiom of like kids are excellent judges of character.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is that Scorsese does this so well, and it's the thing that he does so well in all of his movies. Like, you like these characters as you're watching them like mangle people and shoot people and ruin families and destroy lives and abuse their own families. Like,
I was gonna say, I feel like there's kind of like a poetry to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting looking at this movie from the lens of like not cinema, not like a movie, not something you watch. Like, this stuff happened, in some form or another. This is all real. Mm-hmm. And Scorsese is one of those filmmakers that doesn't really shy away from that. It's like, as much as this stuff's funny, like, he recognizes, sometimes like really funny stuff happens at the same time as really horrific stuff, or right after, or right before. Mm-hmm. And he really, uses this movie as like a way to reflect on that. I think one of the most interesting lenses that the movie works through is looking at it in Scorsese's filmography. Because, obviously you don't have the background of a lot of his movies like in your repertoire. And so there's things in this that aren't original anymore that Scorsese basically invented. Mm-hmm. Like, he's not the first and not even remotely the first, mob movie director, but he came in 1995 and made Goodfellas, which is like the seminal mobster movie, even though they'd been making them for 50 years before that. And that's pretty insane. And the thing about The Irishman that's so interesting is that instead of being a Goodfellas thing where we're watching someone in witness protection who's still alive reflect on how his bad decisions led him there, which is a somber, kind of like reflective look at this thing, but with a sense of humor, kind of like a don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And instead of Wolf of Wall Street, where Jordan Belfort's now a national celebrity because of the movie again, and made more than $1 million off of that movie's commission, something that Scorsese was like rightfully very heavily criticized for. Mm. And so, Scorsese obviously didn't make the movie to endorse him, but to show the lack of consequences that our society has. And Belfort making that money was an example of that. But The Irishman's not that. It's a very it's over for these guys. We see them at age 90. Like, we see how all of them die, except for Frank. He doesn't die, but he's about to die when the movie ends. We see them imprisoned, battered, falling apart, cancer, all these things. They're broken men. The things that they did, and their physical health have destroyed them, and there's nothing to show for it. It's all gone. Mm-hmm. And still, Frank won't tell investigators who did it. He just doesn't want to.
Well, and I think that's also there's that one line in the movie that's 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. So he's that last one alive, and I feel like even though there's no one left to really suffer the consequences, I mean, even his caregiver, she didn't even know who Jimmy Hoffa was. So yeah, you're right. There wasn't really anyone left to care, but he still maintained all of that.
There's that monologue about how being buried in the ground is too final, being cremated is too final. But if you're in one of those buildings, if you're in a crypt and you're in a metal box and you're right behind that wall, you're dead, but it's not as final. And that's kind of a somber way for Scorsese's latest movie to end. He's in his 70s or 80s. He's an old guy now, and he's reflecting back on his life and his work. And I think in ways he's calling on everyone to question, am I too caught up in the minutia of what I'm doing? And is it really going to be worth it for me to compromise my morals and who I should be as a person for some material goals? And that's what a lot of mob movies are about, but this one specifically spends a lot of time watching its characters just die, basically, just rot. Yeah.
And then in the end, it's just him,
Right.
and he's left with barely even any, like you said, like remorse for the situation. Thank you guys for watching. For backlog episodes, they can be found on the Loyola Phoenix websites as well as our YouTube channel.